Hello, and welcome to session number 2, Meaningful Learning Experiences Through Structure and Routine for our online virtual PD. Again, this is Heather Hilz-Fitzgerald with the Romoland School District, and I'm excited to be here and share with us ideas as to how we can house our daily and weekly learning for this virtual setting. So today we're going to do some things such as we're going to go ahead and look at, let me go back. We're going to be looking at the pedagogy of online learning. We're going to see some structures that are potentially going to be successful for us based on different grade levels and whatnot. And then also look at other delivery options for instruction. So one of the biggest things that I thought was so eye-opening at the point of closures was that experts were really telling us to take your work that you plan to push out for students and cut that in half and then cut that in half again. And not necessarily lessening our load or watering down our learning, but ultimately remembering that our students aren't there in real time with us to get clarification or guidance for their learning. So in many ways, we need to be very specific in the goals that we want them to reach. We need to establish a consistent routine for the week, and we need to be available for support. So giving your students and families grace as they transition into this new learning model is also extremely important. And even for yourself as an educator is also important. Being realistic. What do I really want my students to learn and to know? Is it meaningful and rigorous? Is it engaging? Is it going to spark interest? And so we'll go ahead and start looking at how we can structure that. So really reflecting on our units of study at this time is going to be crucial. So if we take our units of study or our curriculum and we really begin to refine it for online usage. And the goal of our online experience is to still have our students access the content standards for their grade level. So ultimately, your units of study or curriculum is going to be your hub to really create that foundation of learning for the trimester, breaking that down by the weeks and each day. So again, pulling from your priority standards and then plugging them into the simple practice and completion of tasks. And so that being said, remember that the less is more. Provide short mini lessons, time to practice, and making connections to real world tasks based on standards make it much more meaningful and relevant to our students. And from there, as we then push out those types of learning experiences to our students, then we can hone in and observe what accommodations or modifications might be needed for students based on their production of work. And so we can then intervene and personalize where necessary. But ultimately, being really having your eyes open to the possibility of maybe changing that final product for a specific student, or maybe giving them the option to provide a different way of showing their learning. So I wanted to go ahead and share this component that was previously worked on with a group of teachers. But in any educational practice, we know that analyzing, pulling our priority standards is necessary. And so the coaching team during closure started working on this activity where we were able to look at standards that would focus for the entire trimester. And then thoughts were to then kind of chunk those together to create the BiWeekly units that would really hit all areas that students needed to look at. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you this as an example, because if you're trying to break up your learning over the trimester and then even gauge it down into week-like chunks, this is a great sample that you could potentially work with as a collective grade level or as a collective subject area to decide upon what would need to be taught during that time or during that week. And then you can really see then how to make more of that cross-curricular approach so that we're not piling up the work for possibly 4 different subject areas, but how can we make those cross-curricular connections, possibly between your social studies and your ELA and or your science and math. And I apologize for the lag. I shall pause for a second. Okay, so now we see that we have this really nice graphic organizer that places the different standards, seeing the connection to wonders, seeing the connection to our math, and therefore also translating it into science and social studies. So just being aware of what are the different things that are necessary to teach our students so that we're not bogging down with any busy work or work that ultimately isn't quite necessary, especially when time is of essence during that within a virtual platform. So I'm going to go ahead and move on, and I'll be out of presentation mode now, just so that we can begin to look at options of how to house the learning. Okay, so housing the learning plan is definitely going to be a big benefit, because when we look at students and families having to access this learning plan, we want to make sure that there is something that's consistent with a weekly routine that is eventually going to house the instruction and activities that will take place within either that week or bi-weekly like approach. Again, really trying to reflect on keeping things as cross-curricular as possible, and making sure that we're tying in texts and real-world math problems that can focus around those social studies and science-like topics. So we're going to look a little bit deeper into some of these plans. I'll go ahead and click over here on a suggested example for primary students. And so within this weekly plan, you'll notice that it's housed in a Google Slides template. And within it, you would see the consistent, repetitive nature of what possibly parents or students would come across, so that every week wasn't a guessing game or trying to learn something new. So the first page is going to be a representation of the Bitmoji classrooms that have kind of been a popular trend within the educational world since the closures. And this is actually what the activity is going to be for the end of this session, building your own Bitmoji classroom. But this is just another opportunity for you to provide kind of that personalization of what and who you are as a teacher, as well as provide different accessibility tools and or engaging activities through hyperlinking some of these different added items in the classroom. You'll notice that will take them to a shape song. If you were interested in, oops, I didn't actually want to go to that. Interested in providing a read aloud for the students based on a core piece of literature that you'd be working on, that would be also beneficial to kind of house in here. And then, yes, it is cute, it is eye-catching, and it just gives a little bit pizzazz. From there, you'll notice that we'll go into the next slide, and you'll see that our learning goals and success criteria are going to be housed on that page once it eventually decides that it's going to move to that slide. And then this is, again, that was that work that we did while we analyzed our units of study, pulled out priority standards, and chunked them together in meaningful ways to really give students the grade level instruction that they're going to need, even while in a virtual realm. Another really great idea for an added bonus in your slide deck, or however you're going to house your weekly learning plan, would also be just kind of an overview of the consistent resources that are used by you as an educator on a daily basis, because parents aren't necessarily completely aware of what's the difference between Seesaw and what's the difference between Google Classroom. So this is just kind of a way for parents to be aware of what are their students accessing. This is just an added element, the unit overview, for parents who might want to see the larger idea of what is going to be taking place for the learning. That's that. And then I'm going to actually hone in on one day that you can see what it might look like for a student. So this obviously probably would work best for, first, second, and even third. And you may even want to begin to incorporate imagery as a way to kind of train students into what area of subject matter that they would be focusing on. But you notice that we have all of the core subject areas here broken down. We have a sentence starter that will allow them to understand what they're actually going to be completing. And in that, they have the different activities that need to be completed in order to meet that learning target. A lot of these are going to be hyperlinked from your actual Google Classroom. So once you've created an assignment in Google Classroom, there's an option for you to access the link, to place that link wherever you would want, so that when a student clicks on that link, it will take them to the assignment in Google Classroom for each individualized student. Other elements that are important and I think necessary when we're talking about structure and routine in our day, inserting maybe a daily screencastify of teacher directions. So having a teacher verbally read what is going to be taking place each day, even supporting our English learners, and maybe using Spanish as a way to dictate the different activities that are taking place, just so that they have clarity. You also will notice that you can enter different times and or dates as to when you will be meeting. Obviously, it is an expectation, and we will be instructing our students on a daily basis as a whole class. But then you may even want to break it down into your small group sessions as well, and just having a place where families can check to see when they need to be logged in is a great, it just keeps everybody on the same page. You can also include optional learning ideas that incorporate exercise or creativity. And then last but not least, if your expectation is an iReady lesson a day, these could be interactive elements where students move the stars to the different subject areas of math or reading to show that they have completed that for the day. And then this would continue for the rest of the week, pretty much following the same pattern on a daily basis, because again, we really want to establish that structure and routine with our families and with our students so that there is the least amount of confusion that is possible, right? And a lot of times I noticed in teachers' classrooms, they use the Friday as somewhat of a possible makeup day. A lot of times in hybrid platforms or blended learning type platforms, you'll notice that that opportunity is given to students. That way they are capable of going back and reflecting on the work that they had possibly missed, or maybe things that they need to relearn. And those Fridays are also a really great opportunity for teachers to have those one-on-one opportunities to check in with their students, and or even incorporate some type of a fun Friday option that gives students, again, that heightened sense of culture building, community, and feeling a part of something that's ultimately grander as it can be while they're not face to face. So that's kind of the housing of a Friday learning plan, making sure that you're checking in with teacher, reviewing work, and possibly some type of a fun activity. So if we go over into the upper grade models as well, they're very similar in the sense of keeping just that consistent routine and structure. This one I'm going to share, this is a single subject learning plan. And one of the things that I had found during my research while we were on closures and through distance learning is how effective and how organized the 5E model is when it comes to developing these learning plans. It keeps everything kind of in a consistent rotation of engaging into a learning process. So I created this Bitmoji classroom because thinking about our middle school teachers, we know that you are very much so a team of teachers for all of those students. And so that could be a fun way to create that culture. And there you'll see that the learning goals are also consistent and provided to students so that they know what is necessary to be successful. Again, the resources for the unit available to parents so that they can differentiate what different applications a student should be accessing. And then we'll get into just one of the first days. If it decides that it would like to. Oh yeah, this is also an added element, which would be your iReady success tracking sheet. I know a lot of, I know the Avid schools and the Leader in Me schools are, very much so, they rely on students being able to track their own success and being aware of the different things that they are either studying for and or learning. And so this is a great way for them to be able to go ahead and reflect on the lessons that they had done within iReady. And then that allows for the teacher to also go in and analyze where they may need some support on lessons that were not completed. So then going into an actual day, if we're looking at this biweekly like structure, and the 5E model for each E, it was generally 2 days. So the first day is obviously a way that we can engage our students. And so using multimedia as a way to do that, especially because we're in a virtual element, is going to probably be our best bet. So still providing what the big idea was, giving some different essential questions, and then providing the actual activities that needed to take place, in order for them to be successful and mark off. And noticing that a lot of these activities will also include things that aren't just an online learning program to do some lessons through. These are strategic activities that are going to really allow for students to dive into what the standards are that they need to master. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of that example. Again, what you'll have access to all of this and all of the hyperlinks within Google Classroom so that you can use them and make them your own. So that being said, you've mapped out your standards, right? And now you've designed your weekly template. So now what to teach and now how. And so teaching remotely can obviously include lots of possibilities. But again, we really want to try to get away from just those online learning programs. And we also want to think about some of those non-tech options too. So we want to move away from the usage of worksheets, but a lot of times we can transform our Google Docs and make them digital. We can go ahead and use things that will allow for students to incorporate the 4 C's, such as collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and above all, creativity. Because again, with technology, we're really trying to transition our students from consuming, but rather to create with that technology. So obviously one of my go-tos would be having students use some type of an EDU protocols. They are set up for success with instructional strategies that get down to business. And so this is an example here called the Book of Kucha, which is pretty much like a book report, but you could totally transform it to any subject area necessary. You can designate it for students to address specific standards and then allow for students to reflect and share. And this is a great opportunity to, a lot of times they call it app smashing. So if you're using a Google Doc to create your Book of Kucha or Google Slide, and then having students screencastify or Flipgrid themselves, reflecting or sharing orally about what they created is a great way for them to produce and show their learning. Again, using a lot of multimedia to enhance multiple modes of learning and listening. So using YouTube for students to maybe access content and then allow them to, again, record themselves using Screencastify or Flipgrid. Another really cool tool that's Google-based is Google Tour Builder. I've used it multiple times in my classroom in the past. Students could do everything from creating narratives to also, mapping out different historical time periods. And so that's always fun for students to dive in. And plus, it's relevant in real life. Again, ideas for math in the same boat. We have the EDU protocols. There's so many different types of graphic organizers and processes that will help support students in their math learning. And so check those out. Also, all of our Google apps, which we have accessible since we're a Google district, are really great tools to help support students who may need that accommodation. And I, for one, really enjoy Google Draw and Google Slides as a way to show what they know, especially when you think about geometry and asking them to produce handwritten shapes. Sometimes it's a little scary. Sometimes it just doesn't go very well. And you'll be very surprised to see how well students, even at a young age, can manipulate the tools within Google Slides or Google Drawings. And then one other thing is that using that Screencastify, maybe even having them use their iPhone if they're in the middle school setting to record themselves doing lessons on their own and then submitting them either just to you or to the whole class. Because definitely it's always great to see how other students learn and other strategies of how they solve. So I also wanted to go ahead and incorporate our social studies and science. But again, it's always kind of that unique spin of how am I going to balance all of those? But ultimately, if we really rely again with our ELA and math, it should be a very simple process to intertwine your social studies and science. And so, in my practice as a teacher, ultimately, my driving force of thematic units were from my social studies and science because those were the spark for my students. And using these topics and big ideas really do support all of the resources you will bring into your ELA and mathematics. I obviously am a true believer in Newsella certified educator, because it really sets our students up for success as lifelong readers of current publications and news. So knowing your priority standards in either social studies or science will then allow you to pull that literary or mathematical scenarios that you want to develop. And really, again, thinking of those real world applications, the connections to the topics in life that are sometimes more important than to remember the standard algorithm or developing the perfect paragraph. Having students be a part of those topics first and then connecting it to the standards definitely gives you that hook and that buy-in. So again, connecting your ELA and your math to these core subjects and providing opportunities for those exploratory activities, you'll have your kids hooked from in the class to even at home. So as we know, voice and choice is extremely important for our students, as it is for us as adults as well. And so I went ahead and I've pulled some different optional schedules that have been presented by other teachers, because in order for us to teach well, we also need to be able to have that instruction, organization, and our pedagogical practices that are most meaningful to us. That way, we feel confident in how we're going to continue to teach our students on a weekly basis. So these are all hyperlinked as well. You can access those. And again, thank you. So that was session number 2. And I'm obviously extremely happy to be with you all. And I'm thankful that you've taken your time to go through this module. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I am going to show you what your next assignment is going to be. So since this is session number 2, you are going to be on assignment for session number 2. And like I said previously before, this is where you're going to be able to craft your own Bitmoji classroom. You're going to watch this video tutorial, which is a really great outline as to how to create one of those Bitmoji classrooms using Google Slides. And then lastly, you'll go ahead and this is where you'll make the Bitmoji classroom is within this Google slide deck. You'll submit this, but we're also hoping for a shared final product within the shared drive, and you can access that through this link here. One of the reasons why not only making this Bitmoji classroom as being a way to create that individualized connection to your students and kind of show them who you are as an educator or just as a person, but this is a great way for people to also get used to some of the Google Slide tools that most definitely can really enhance your lesson design and your instructional design. So again, thank you so much, and I can't wait to see those Bitmoji classrooms.